When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblin Juju channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing a kind of continuation of a video I did a couple weeks ago, and it was really talking about the Battle of Ice, a theory explained. It was really talking about the Night Lamp theory, and how theoretically Stannis could defeat the incoming Frey host. And in this video, we're going to be building off of that and going into how Stannis can then, off of that win, turn that into taking Winterfell. Now, there's a couple of theories we're going to go through, a couple of different outcomes we could be looking at that are all fairly possible. So, again, before we get into the video, let me know, do you guys think Stannis will take Winterfell? Put down in the comments, yes, he will, no, he won't, whatever your reasoning for it is. We're going to be exploring that completely within this video. But before we get into it, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow. People that might like this content as well, and let's get into it. So, let's begin with some context here. How would, in any situation, would Stannis be able to take Winterfell? Winterfell is a castle that is very hard to attack and or siege. Again, Stannis' forces are not in the best shape. They've been out in the snow for a while. They've been kind of starving to a degree. How is that going to happen, right? Even if they beat the Freys, that's different. That's an open war, right? It's an open battle in which Stannis can use their position to his advantage. Now, in this situation, he's going to become the attacker and not the defender. Much different. So, how would we look at how this is going to happen? Now, I think very similar to the way we hear Storm's End get taken, because again, another really tough castle to take. How do you take a castle like that? You either, one, siege it for a very long time and starve them out. That's not an option for Stannis. And in the case of Storm's End, when we look at that, we're told that it's taken by guile. So we know that if Stannis is going to take it, it's going to have to be some sort of trickery. Something else is going to be going on besides just brute force that Stannis is just a better military commander. Because there needs to be more than that. So let's look at some possible outcomes to this. So the first outcome we can look at is that the Manderleys just straight up flip sides. They go to Stannis. They help defeat the Freys. What can the Manderleys now do? They could possibly do an idea that Stannis has been defeated. His forces are destroyed. They take back his magical sword, maybe his crown, and just basically show to Ramsay and Roose that Stannis is confirmed dead. I think if they had the sword and the crown, that would be enough to convince someone like Ramsay and Roose. And who knows, we may see Ramsay killing Roose as well. We could see that as well, something like what we saw on the show. But, with that being said, how does that help Stannis take Winterfell? So, I also want to look at the idea of the pink letter, because if you're going off of the basic premise or the theory, and I think it's probably the more, common one, it's not one of the more outlandish ones, I guess, or maybe not outlandish, because I think a lot of the pink letter theories have a lot of merit, but I think of, I guess the most common opinion on the theory. So, for instance, who are Jon's parents? Rhaegar and Lyanna is kind of the common theory. So we're going to go with that Ramsay writes this letter. Now, how would that fit in? It's said that Stannis is dead, that Ramsay has his flaming sword, or his magical sword. That would fit into that really well. And that's why I think either way we would go with this. And another thing we've seen foreshadowed is that Stannis says, you may hear that I'm dead, when he's telling, I believe it's Justin Massey, about, he may hear rumors that he's dead when he's going to go get sellswords for Shireen or Stannis' cause with the gold they have just gotten from the Iron Bank. So, I think everything kind of fits into this idea that Stannis, even if he wins the Battle of Ice, is going to play dead. Either way. And again, we know that no one in this weather right now is really able to scout really well, so Stannis could pull back and theoretically hide really well. So then, how does that impact? Now, again, I think there's two differently clear ways you can go here. Is one, you could say, well, doesn't it look kind of suspicious if none of the Frey soldiers come back? So we could see some situation where Stannis dresses up some of his army, the more, I guess, southern-looking parts of his army, in the Frey clothes. And that would allow some of the Frey soldiers to get into the castle with the Manderleys, who are also on board, and then have them do a Troy situation, or the Trojan horse type thing, where then all of these people open the gates, probably the middle of the night, Stannis' forces come through, and they end up taking the castle. Now, that could be true, but we could also see something else. Another interesting idea or theory as to how Winterfell could be taken and make it a little bit more sense than that is that so Roose and Ramsay, again, on this premise, think that Stannis is dead, right? Stannis is gone. He's not a factor anymore, and that his threat is gone. We see that some other northern contingency or force or allies to say Stannis, or maybe he takes some of his own force, maybe it's like a remnant of his army that maybe Ramsay or Roose thinks, and they do an attack on the Dreadfort, or siege it, basically. What this would do is this would take some of Roose or Ramsay's forces, and they would go to the Dreadfort. And that would heavily weaken Winterfell's guard, which would allow a force like the Manderleys, or say some of this fake Frey force, to then infiltrate and take the castle. All of these are high possibilities. I think all of them make sense. Now, in this theory, could we also see it being something as simple as, oh, Stannis, yes, he wins the Battle of Ice, but he just doesn't have the troops to be able to take Winterfell. I think that's also possible. Again, we've also seen it foreshadowed quite heavily that Stannis' army is not in good shape. Stannis is not going to be able to do a siege. And if Roose and Ramsay kind of just realize that, then they probably will be fine. So that, to me, are some of the most likely options as to how the battle for Winterfell is going to go. Now, another interesting wild card that we have to think about in this theory is that Mance is still alive, presumably at this point. Could Mance be a character that helps maybe smuggle in Stannis, maybe some of Stannis' soldiers? Could that be another element of this? Because we've already seen Mance and some of his women basically try to sneak out Theon and Jane. So could that also be another factor that we would have to implement into this theory? It's another great idea. And to me, that is the most likely option for Stannis is going to win, is going to be through guile, doing these things that maybe Ramsay and Roose won't see coming. Especially Ramsay. I don't think Ramsay is that smart. Roose is the one you really want to fool. Roose is really, in my opinion, the real danger. Because if Ramsay comes into power and say he kills his father like it happened in the show, I think Stannis will have a much easier time with tricking Ramsay. And that'll be an interesting point is, will we see Ramsay and Roose even die at Winterfell? Some people have even theory crafted that, hey, if we do see this idea that there's a distraction with maybe the Dreadfort being sieged to lure out the Boltons and a force of them, then maybe we actually don't see their deaths or what happens with them until much later in the story, when either the White Walkers come and just steamroll the north, which is what I think is going to happen, or they'll just be dealt with on the way south, which I think is also just as likely. Personally, for me, when you look at all of the storylines that need to happen and how we have to conclude things, I think a lot of these villainous characters that don't allow for some unification of the country against the others have to be taken out at some point. I just think having Roose and Ramsay live on to maybe the end of Winds of Winter or even with Dream, I just don't think it really makes sense. I think you want to wrap up all those plot lines is the reason that George is having so many issues with finishing the book. I think having it wrap up with, say, Stannis takes Winterfell, he kills whoever's left of Ramsay and Roose, but there's a but here. He does win, but then by the end of Winds of Winter, the others have made it through the wall, and the others, they take Winterfell, defeating Stannis, but he buys enough time and is able to hold Winterfell long enough to allow our forces to go south. That, I think, is a logical conclusion of this story, because the problem with if we do something like what the show did, and why I don't think it's going to happen this way, is that if we have this whole idea where Jon is the one that ends up rallying the rest of the North after Stannis' defeat, it's gonna be, you can't really do that quickly, right? How do you do that? Like, you're gonna need at least half of the book to kind of set that up, in my opinion, because you're gonna have a portion of this book where Jon's not even alive. He's brought back. Then there's a lot of different routes you can go with Jon being brought back. There's a lot of things that the show didn't even cover that I think will be really interesting topics of discussion. And then you have to have Jon coming to the conclusion that he's going to try and take out Ramsay and Roose, and then garnering all these out. It feels like everything they did in Dance, right, with Stannis' character, for him to inevitably challenge Roose, you'd have to do with Jon all over again. And Jon may have an easier time because, you know, he is half Stark. But at the same time, I don't think that makes sense. I think it makes more sense of Jon coming into this leadership role because of either Stannis, like, appointing him, and also you have a lot of things converging right now. Howland Reed presumably would be able to tell who Jon's parents are if they're Rhaegar and Lyanna. You'd also have Rob's will possibly saying that Jon is an actual Stark and his heir. You have a lot of things converging that could make Jon's status and the person that could be leading the way for the North kind of converging in Winds of Winter. So that is the way I think it's more natural that he ends up taking control, right? He helps with the remnants of Stannis' forces that he has that retreats, the rest of the northern forces to probably the Trident or the Neck, anywhere in that area, basically. And that to me is a logical conclusion for kind of the Stannis camp. But let me know what you guys think about Stannis, and where do you guys think it's going to go with him either taking Winterfell or not taking Winterfell? How do you guys think the Boltons are going to go out? I think there's a lot of interesting questions revolving the northern plotline, and that's why it's pretty much my favorite plotline going into Winds of Winter. But thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.